The only thing we need is to download the latest Maven version, which is zipped. So I'm going to just Google Maven download. This will show us an official website where you can download Maven for different purposes. And right here, you have all of the downloadable files for the latest Maven version. And I'm going to go for a zip archive and just click here, and this will start a download. And in the downloads folder, we have now Apache Maven zip file. So I'm going to extract it. And in this folder, we have Apache Maven with the version, and we have all the Maven files right here. And we also have the same binary folder, just like we saw in the Java installation. So this is where Maven executables are actually located. And the same way as we did for Java, if we want Maven commands to be executable directly by just typing mvn like this, we need to tell Windows where to find that executable, because right now Windows doesn't know that, and it says it's not a recognized command, so it can't actually execute it. So I'm just going to grab the bin location here. So I'm going to copy this, going back to advanced settings, environment variables. And again, remember that whenever you want commands to be executable without full path, these have to be part of the path environment variable. So I'm going to edit this and add a new one here with Maven/bin location, right? Just like for Java, right here, we also need a binary folder. And that's a longer path, but that's basically where it's located. And again, as you see here, the location could be basically anywhere. You just have to tell Windows where that location is. So you could move it somewhere else, rename the folder, whatever, but just type the correct location here. So I'm going to save this. And again, I'm going to close this window and reopen it so that we can check Maven installation, and I'm going to execute. And as you see, it worked. It says build failure because we haven't passed it any command. However, the command was found. And now we can actually restart our IntelliJ and use Maven command or test Maven command for building our application. So I'm going to close it. So now let's actually test our Maven command. So I'm going to do a Maven mvn package, which should actually build our application. And as you see, it worked because we have build success message here. So everything in this Java Maven application is now configured. You can run it in IntelliJ. You can build it using Maven command. And with this, you're going to be ready to follow the videos of Java Maven application in this module. And as I said, right now, do not worry about understanding the structure here and understanding the files, etc. We're going to talk about all of this in the later videos when we actually start building the application and digging a little bit deeper into the build tools. So that completes the Java Maven installation part. So I'm going to actually close this project from here. So instead of closing the whole IntelliJ, you can actually close individual projects. And this will show me an IntelliJ dialog where I have the project list, which I have opened previously, and where I can add and open new projects. So as a second task, we're going to open a Java Gradle project. This time, though, we will have to download the latest Gradle version before we open the project. So I'm going to go back to my browser and search for Gradle download and then click on the first result. The Gradle website actually has pretty clear instructions on how to install Gradle. And I'm going to install it by clicking on the binary only zip file link here. In the downloads folder, we now have this Gradle bin archive that I'm going to extract here to unpack the contents. And for Gradle, actually, there is an additional folder we need to create. If you select the C drive, the local disk, which is the root drive of the computer where the operating system is installed, I'm going to create the folder right here. If I right-click and select New Folder, I can give it the name Gradle, which is what the installation instructions also tell us to do. The next step is to copy the Gradle installation contents to this empty Gradle folder. If we go back to the Gradle bin folder that you see here, we just need to drag and drop this to the Gradle folder on the root of the C drive, like this. And again, just like Java and Maven, because we want to be able to execute these Gradle commands without typing the full path, we need to add this to our environment variables. So in advanced system settings and then environment variables, we want to add a new one to our system variables. So I'm going to edit this again. And I'm just going to grab the bin folder location here and copy this folder path. Then new and paste this value right here. This needs to be set to the bin folder location and not just the Gradle folder. So that's very important to note. So then I'm going to click OK and OK again and move back to IntelliJ. One final thing we need to do is to configure IntelliJ to now use this location installation of Gradle. I'm going to click on Customize and then All Settings. Right here, I will search for Gradle. Under the source, I will change the distribution to local installation. And if you notice, IntelliJ will then automatically find the Gradle folder we have just set up. So I will do Apply and then OK. So the same way, I'm going to get it from version control system, which is Git, and paste in the URL of the project. Also, when cloning a project, if you get a pop-up with username and password, then you have to just enter your username and password for a GitLab or GitHub account or wherever you have that project, and then you will be able to clone it. In my case, it doesn't ask for the credentials because it has them already. And now you are going to see that IntelliJ will detect that it's a Gradle project, you see right here, and it will start installing all the dependencies, all the Gradle dependencies, installing all the Gradle plugins, and basically preparing the whole environment so that you can run your application, which is really great because you don't have to do anything here. Everything is automated for you. IntelliJ executed basically everything in the background, and this is our project structure. Here you can see the Gradle folder, which has been created by IntelliJ, which contains information about Gradle version, etc. Now first, I'm gonna try to execute the application to see that everything works. So basically the JDK that IntelliJ is using and that it automatically configured in this case works to run the application. So let's test that first. And again, you see that the process starts in this Run tab. And now our application is actually running, right? You see application, started application in whatever seconds. Now let's stop the application and go into the terminal. Now we're going to build this application using a Gradle command. So we're going to execute Gradle build, execute, and here we see build success, which means that we have built the application without any errors using Gradle. Awesome. So again, this was another project that you're going to see in detail in the later videos, but this basically should help you to set it up in your IntelliJ. So that completes the setup of our Java Gradle project. Again, we will dive into the file structure and the Gradle itself in later videos, but you're going to have a prepared setup for that. And here's actually one very interesting thing to know generally when working with IntelliJ and working with applications in IntelliJ is that you actually have two different environments of running your application, okay? So one of them is the IntelliJ itself. So this project structure and SDK that we just configured. So all of this is basically the environment that IntelliJ configures for your application. And in that environment, you can run your application and you can build your application using this button here, right? So now with this JDK, if I run this application, IntelliJ will take care of compiling these, building these, and running using the project structure configuration. And you see here which JDK is being used. You see that Java executable is executed to run the application. And there you go, we see application started without problems. So that's one environment. You see that it's in the Run tab. And another environment is when we execute the application, when we build the application or run it in the terminal, right? So now we are actually in our operating system environment. This is just like our command line terminal that we have in our operating system, right? So in this environment, basically the configuration like setting the Java home, the path variable, etc. applies. So all of that we did so that we can execute Maven package command in this terminal, right? So, and that's a very important thing to differentiate. So for example, if you can execute the application in IntelliJ, but it doesn't work here in the terminal, you know that these are two different environments. So you have to fix that environment separately. Great. So now we saw how to set up Java Maven and Java Gradle projects and how to configure a JDK for both of them. And now let's look at setting up our final Node.js project in IntelliJ, which is also pretty easy. So we have these two now. And as a final project, I'm going to open a Node.js application the same way using URL to my project. So that's the project URL. I'm going to clone it. And there you go. Now, JavaScript projects are actually much simpler than Java projects. So it's going to need way less time to open and index everything. So we're going to be set in just a couple of seconds. And basically everything is ready now, right after opening it. And to see the structure, we basically have this Node.js file. Again, we're going to go into all of these code specifics in later section. But to run this application, we're going to need Node, right? To execute Node server.js command so that this starts. And also we're going to need npm command so that we can install all the dependencies, right, of this Node project. So just like we use Gradle and Maven to install dependencies, we're going to use npm to install dependencies. However, you see that IntelliJ doesn't do that automatically, the dependency installation, just like we saw in Java projects. So we're going to have to do it manually by executing a very simple npm install command. And to be able to execute Node and npm commands, we have to install them. And that's actually one installation. So we just have to install Node, and it has both inside. And that's also very simple, actually. I'm going to go to browser, and here I'm going to do Node, download Node. And here we have the latest versions for different operating systems. And the one we need is going to be the Windows installer. So not the binary, but the installer. So basically, installer compared to the binary will install both tools and set the path variable location. So basically do all of that for you. So you don't have any manual effort. So that's what we're going to download. And we're going to take the 64-bit. Most of the newer versions are actually in 64-bit. And that's what we're going to take, 64-bit of Windows installer. And this will start the download. And in my downloads folder, now I have this Node installer. And as I said, this installs both Node.js and npm. So I'm going to just double click on this. And it will show a installation wizard. And here you have a summary of all the things that this installer will do for you. And as I said, here you see Node.js will be installed, npm will be installed, documentation shortcuts, we're not interested. And both of these commands will be added to the path variable automatically, so we don't have to do that manually. And I'm going to do next, and this will start the installation. Great, so finished. And now we actually will have to again restart IntelliJ, because if I do node -v, the command is not recognized. So let's restart it one last time. And now if I do node -v here, so just to print out the version, it should work. So we have the Node.js version, and npm command should work as well. And there you go. And just as a check here, the environment variable path is, as I said, automatically updated by this Node.js installer. So if I do edit here, you see that the Node.js path or location of the executables is specified here, which is program files /Node.js. And if we check that location, program files, Node.js, this is where both node commands and npm executables are located. And now to test our application setup in general, I'm going to move into the API directory. And I'm going to execute npm install. Because important to remember that you have to execute npm install in the folder where the package.json file is located. That's why we had to switch to the API directory and execute the command there. This will install all the dependencies for this application, which is again very minimal. And after that, we're gonna execute node server.js or node server just without JS. So this will start the application, but we may get a Windows security pop-up. We just have to allow access for our Node.js application, and that's it. And this is basically a log entry from our application, right? This is what the server.js says. This project was also successfully opened in IntelliJ. We installed npm and node, which you're going to need to build the application, to install dependencies, etc. Again, we're going to see all of that in the later video, but this should help you set up your Node.js project. So with that, we have set up everything on our machine that you are going to need in this Build Tools module to follow along with all the following videos where I show you these projects.